This defensive line class is absolutely phenomenal. I counted up about 23 defensive linemen in these first two rounds here. So let's just dive right into my top 10 defensive ends, the edge rushers. I don't see too much changing in terms of my rankings from now until the draft. Number 10 being Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, kind of the unsung hero of that defensive line behind Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. Number 9, Jack Sawyer, good bull rush, high football IQ, leader of men attribute that I don't really see a lot of guys just overall in the draft, not even just the defensive line guys. Number 8, Donovan Ezaraku, 16 and a half sacks at Boston College, uber productive. Any of these 5 through 8 guys you could put in whatever order, and I wouldn't really have too much of contention with, except my number 5 I'm really, really high on, and I'm excited to talk about him. Number 7, Mike Green out of Marshall, 17 sacks. You could go top 10, wouldn't be shocked. James Pierce Jr. had some first overall buzz at one point out of Tennessee. Now it's kind of died down a little bit, but again, top 10, wouldn't be shocked. That leads me to my number 5 guy, my absolute plant the flag guy. There's been 4 guys standing 6'3", weighing 263 pounds, having a 40-inch vertical since 2003. There's been 4 guys. Myles Garrett, Mario Williams, my number 3 edge rusher, who I'll get to in a minute, Landon Jackson is my number 5 edge rusher out of this draft. He's come a long way since that famous video back in the day. Elite hand technique. Love his explosiveness. I would be shocked if he goes outside the top 40. This is going to be one of those guys in the mid to late first round that teams are going to be falling over each other to go get. This guy's, he has it. He has the tools to be an elite pass rusher at the next level. That leads me to number 4, kind of this tier 2 of pass rushers. Jalen Walker out of Georgia. He has the traits. He wouldn't shock me as a guy absolutely flying off the edge and grabbing double-digit sacks within his first 2 years in the league. Wouldn't shock me at all. Same thing with the rest of the guys in this tier, and for as well as number 1, who we all know who number 1 is going to be. But number 3 going in also that other name in that top, or in those 4 players since 2003 stat, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. He's the best defensive player Texas A&M has brought out in a few years. Gives me a little bit of Myles Garrett right there. He's got a great swim move, got great finesse moves. I like his hand technique. I think he's a top 10 guy. Mykel Williams, I think he's more polished than Jalen Walker is. He got a couple more pressures than he did at Georgia last year. I am a huge fan of Mykel Williams, and that leads me to number 1. We all know who it is. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Abdul Carter, the first or second best prospect in this draft. You could convince me either way, and I wouldn't object too much. Guys who just missed the cut, but I do think are going to go in the first 2 rounds. Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M just missed the cut. And JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State, the guy who lined up out opposite of Jack Sawyer, is a guy I think could possibly go in those first 2 rounds there. As for the defensive tackles, I'm going to spend a little less time on them, but number 10 coming in at Omar Norman-Lott out of Tennessee, guy who lined up with James Pierce Jr. last year. Great strength. I liked his athletic profile. Alfred Collins, absolute behemoth inside for Texas. Basically carried that defense to a playoff along with Jahdae Barron, but didn't say anything about defensive backs. Another guy in that Texas A&M defensive line. The thing that's really interesting about a bunch of guys coming out that where there's like 2 or 3 guys on the defensive line that are highly touted prospects, like Georgia, like Tennessee, like Texas A&M. It's kind of in Michigan and Ohio State. it's kind of hard to see who's really generating the pressure, who's really doing the disrupting. So Shamar Turner, second best Shamar on that defensive line, probably is the second best player on that defensive line, and I think he's probably going in that kind of 40 to 50 range, I'd say, for a team that desperately needs a defensive tackle. Number 7, TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. He's just a disruptor. He's one of the few guys on these two lists that's one of the only guy. He's the only guy really on his unit. Like Kyle Kennard could sneak in a late second round, but it's kind of iffy there. But he's a disruptor from the interior. Team's gonna grab him, and he's very versatile. He can kind of play within whatever scheme you put him in. Number 5, Darius Alexander out of Toledo. Again, a guy who doesn't have a lot of teammates on the defensive line up at the top of this draft, which kind of signals more of it's a good thing and a bad thing. It depends on what program you're from. If you're an SEC program, if you have a couple guys at the top, it's okay. Big Ten, kind of the same thing. But a small school like Toledo, he doesn't have a teammate up this high, so he's by himself, and he's going to be a big-time playmaker at the next level. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, I like him quite a bit. His teammate Jordan Burch could also sneak into the second round, but Derek Harmon was the best player by far on that defense. Kept Oregon alive in the playoff. He had some good reps against that Ohio State offensive line. That leads me to the guy who absolutely owns the Ohio State offensive line, one of the two guys who absolutely owns the offensive line for Ohio State, being Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Absolute monster in the passing game. He's not as good as Mason Graham in the run game, but he's better than Mason Graham in the pass game, and that should say something. The gap between Kenneth Grant's pass rush ability to Mason Graham's pass rush ability is smaller than Mason Graham's run stopping ability to Kenneth Grant's run stopping ability. So, I do really like Kenneth Grant as a prospect. I think that 10 to 20 range is probably ideal for him. Anywhere would suffice. Walter Nolan, again, he's Ole Miss guy, highly touted recruit for Texas A&M back in the day. Absolute disruptor. He could go really anywhere in this first round. I've seen him 32. I've seen him at 10. So it'll be all over the place. And then, to no one's surprise, Mason Graham, Michigan defensive tackle, high school wrestler. Kind of already gone into that a little bit. And then the guy who just missed the cut for me is Florida State defensive tackle Joshua Farmer. And then just one more note, kind of just overall, like Scorton was as high as edge number 4 for me before the Combine, Senior Bowl, CFP, and whatnot. So he's fallen down quite a bit. He's still going to get in that second round, but I'm not as wild on him as I was earlier.